Deb, thank you so much for being here. I understand you're going to show us how to make leggings, which are so popular right now, but you've gone through many years with Simplicity, and how many new patterns do you come up with every year?
We produce, Simplicity produces over 200 new designs every year to add to the continual number of patterns. We do some go away and new ones come in. And then we have our smaller brand new look patterns, which we produce new patterns, a lot of new patterns for that each year as well.
As a child and when I first learned to sew, Mother would just leave me in the fabric department, and because I loved to look through the catalogs. I just thought that was fascinating. And if anyone doesn't realize that all of the pattern companies have these big catalogs available, and they're such fun to go through and look and imagine and see different costumes for children, for babies, for plus sizes. There's just lots of weddings, home decor.
Certainly.
But today, as I mentioned, we're going to do leggings, and this is the page in the catalog, and it's number 8212. You have them memorized.
I have it memorized. Many of them I have memorized.
I bet you do. So once you find it, and this comes in 2 different sizes, right?
Well, that pattern comes all those sizes in one envelope, and the misses size range from extra small to extra large. And then we have its other pattern number, 8327, which is the plus size legging. But basically the style is the same, the instructions are the same, just the pattern pieces inside will be for a larger body.
And of course people do, sewing on knits is nice, but I do think you need to know a few tips and techniques, don't you think?
Yes, you do. So as we talked earlier, the back of that envelope has that little stretch factor rule over here. So you need to follow that because you want to make sure your fabric stretches enough to go on your body and that it fits to the size we've made. And then you also need some tools. You need to have stretch needles that are either ballpoint or stretch needles, because a sharp needle is going to tear your fabric and and leave holes. So either a ballpoint or a needle made for stretch fabrics are a good thing to get when you start it. And then on my machine right now, I have a walking foot, which helps keep the pressure the same as the top on the bottom. Really important when you're sewing with knits. But this pattern, 8212, the legging, the main legging, view A in here, it's an ankle length legging, and it has just an applied waistline band that is either wide or narrow, you can choose, and it's about 5 seams from start to finish. So if you need leggings, if you're going to wear them as a fashion item and you found a really fun piece of fabric, or if you're starting yoga and you found a nice breathable climate control fabric, great reasons to make leggings.
And you mentioned the wider bands. We've got examples of both.
This one's a wide one, and then that little tie-dye denim looking one is the narrower band. And you can choose, even if we tell you that the view A has the wide one and view B has the skinny one, once you learn how to do it, you can swap them out.
Change them.
Exactly.
And exercise, this looks to me like a yoga class or an exercise class. So many beautiful knits on the market.
Definitely, and you can get high quality knits now that really respond well, that wash well. You want to always make sure that the most stretch of the fabric is going around your body. So you may get a fabric, maybe a performance wear, a dance wear fabric that may stretch more in the length grain. I would cut my pieces on the opposite grain then. You always want that stretch to go around your body because you don't want your leggings falling down. You don't want the knees getting saggy. You want them to stay in the right place.
Sure.
So,
okay, and this is what's called a guide sheet.
This is your guide sheet, and it tells you step by step. On the front, it would have showed you how to cut your pattern pieces out. And here are my main 2 pattern pieces for my legging. And I've cut them in a medium just so I had a little more fabric here to work with. I actually think I probably need the medium anyway. And I've transferred my markings. I have my notches, my triple notch for my center back seam. And now the first thing you need to do is you're going to sew 2 legs together. The front and the back of one and the front and the back of the other, and then we put them one leg inside the other, and that's the 3rd seam, and then we put the waistline together, and you're done.
That's it.
So I'm going to stitch just part of my inner leg seam just to show you. You've got to make sure that your raw edges are even, and on your knit fabric, you really need to be working with a small zigzag stitch, because if you do a straight stitch and you pull it, it's going to pop. So you're going to play with your machine settings. I've got this pretty small, and obviously I wouldn't be using a white thread on blue leggings, but I'm just going to get started. I've got my washi tape on here to give me my 5/8 seam allowance, and this machine does nice things. It puts the needles down for me. You don't want to stitch through pins, so I'm going to take that one out. And a little bit of stretch on your fabric, and you're just going to start sewing.
You're pulling it just
slightly,
a
little
just
bit.
Barely.
I'm not even not like this. Just a little bit of tension on the back and on the front, And I want to make sure, I'm not even watching my needle, I'm making sure I line up the outer edge with my tape. That keeps my 5/8 inch seam allowance, especially when you're doing a zigzag. You don't want to get distracted by that needle going back and forth. So I would stitch all my seams the same way, and then that's the 4 seams. I'm going to just take this one out of here right now.
Could you also use a serger if you
You
had
could use
one?
a serger. If you have a 4-thread machine, that means it'll stitch and serge your seam at the same time, and that'll give you the suppleness. I like to use my stretch stitch on my regular machine for my main seam. It goes back and forth a little bit, so I don't have to do a zigzag. And then I use the serger to finish and cut that extra seam allowance away.
And when you're making leggings, do you still have the 5/8 inch seam
You still have the
allowance?
5/8 inch seam. It'll always tell you on your pattern piece and on the guide sheet if we've done anything different.
Different. Okay, good.
So,
would you mind explaining about this
oh,
stretch
certainly.
rule? Because that is
I will
so
explain
important.
about the stretch rule. Let me unpin this so I can give you a little bit of fabric. And the stretch rule, it's called a pick-a-knit rule.
Pick-a-knit,
And I
right
can
here.
actually work. So if you take, and this is between my selvages. So this was cut between my selvages. And I'm going to hold it up. I've got 4 inches of fabric here to this little mark, and I want to stretch it all the way to that.
See if it will stretch
To see if
that
it will
far.
stretch, and then it'll go back and keep its shape. That's the most important thing, is you want it to stretch to get on your body, to do any kind of knit sewing construction methods, but it's got to go back to its original shape. So whereas people can say they can buy leggings for this or that, you buy a nice, good piece of quality knit and you make a pair of leggings, they're going to last, they're going to look right, they're not going to be see-through when you put them on, and
Wash
they're going to
and care
stay,
well.
they're going to keep their shape.
I see.
So
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. So the other thing I'm just going to say is I would stitch this seam twice, and then I would trim it away close because you don't need all that extra seam allowance in there
Bulk.
after you've sewn them, and it's more comfortable to wear. So I would stitch both of these legs. I would then stitch this crotch seam, and then I would be making my waistline casing. And this is a wide casing. I'm going to fold it in half, but we get a little piece of elastic sewn to the inside so that when we're done, and we turn this over, we're folding it right on the upper edge. You feel that there. You can see
I
it
can
on there.
feel-
So
I
it's
see
not
it in here.
bulky, thick
No,
elastic. You don't want that. So we're going to stitch that with a zigzag. We're going to trim away any extra seam allowance in that back so it's not bulky. Then we're going to attach this to the upper edge and hem your legs, and you're done.
And what is the main difference between leggings and jeggings?
Well, jeggings are usually made out of a stretch fabric that looks like denim, but I've discovered that the problem is, and I think it's because they knit it on a twill grain like denim. So unless it's knit like a regular knit, it's not going to give you that stretch. So a jegging won't be quite as fitted as a legging. A jegging would pass for a super tight pair of pants.
Oh, okay.
And then it all
It's a good way to
depends
remember
on your
it.
body. You try, purchasing a garment, you can go try them on. If you can't get them on, they're too small. If you get them on and they're too big, then you buy a different one. But you're sewing these at home. So you really want to make sure you're
good.
using the right fabric, the pattern in the right size, and all the tools that your machine has.
Okay. And we were going to real briefly tell us about the different
Right.
types of seams that we
So
might want to
normally,
use.
when you stitch in a woven fabric, you're going to use a straight stitch. And as you can see, that's not going to have a lot of stretch. And if
Oh,
I
and
pull
that's- it might
if I pull
pop,
it
you
hard
said.
enough,
Oh,
now it's
yeah.
popped. So here's just a normal, regular size zigzag stitch, like a 2.5 in both directions. And it has the suppleness, but I don't want it that big because it's then going to show on the outside. So I've got a sample here of a smaller stitch. This one might be a little too small, but it could depend on the weight of your fabric as well. And then I would stitch twice this seam and trim it
That's
away.
what you mentioned.
Right. Now, also, most machines now, if I've got this nice Brothers Simplicity machine here, it would have a stretch stitch on it as well.
Oh.
And that is...
Is that what this is?
No, that would be a straight stitch, but what it does is it stitches two stitches forward, one back.
Sort of a reinforced stitch.
So it's a reinforced stitch, just like a back stitch almost.
Would
So
you still have to do 2 stitchings, or would
I would
that
still
work?
always do two stitching because you
Okay.
want to get rid of the seam allowance, unless you have the serger, and that
Yeah.
acts as your second stitch.
Right.
So-
And then one other idea.
And then this would be what it would look like. I've done the 2 rows of stitch, and that would have been my initial 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then with really sharp scissors, best tool to have when you're sewing. Tape
Yeah.
measure, good pins, good needles, change your needles frequently on your machine, and an excellent pair of scissors. And little snippers too. So I trimmed it away, and now it's got a lot of stretch. And if it wasn't sewn in white thread, you really wouldn't be seeing anything on the outside.
Well, this is great. Certain years, different trends come along.
Yes.
And it's nice to know that you can make them to fit your body.
Certainly, and in any fabrics. And the beauty now is that knit wear in ready to wear, and then it's trickled down into home sewing market. Fabric availability for good knits. This is stuff that you would get like good performance wear made out of, and you can go buy it in stores and online somewhat too now.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate all this information. Thank you.
My pleasure. I love to do it.